It's Friday, June 19th, 2026. Fridays are Ask or Tell Me Anything. That's all we're doing this morning. Next on the AM Update. A little bit shorter episode this morning. No Friday 5-pack for you. Got a lot of stuff going on this week, one of which I'll be talking about in just a little bit. First of all, some housekeeping. For those of you who are still somehow listening on Apple Podcasts, salute to you. I really appreciate it. I'm not trying to be an ingrate or look a gift horse in the mouth. There have been several people who have said, hey, you need to start a Patreon so loyal listeners can support you since you're no longer making money on this endeavor. I really do appreciate that sentiment. I'm not quite ready to do that yet, although I think I might be getting closer to it. What tickles me pink, though, is that there are still people who are fighting through the issues with distribution. One of the easiest steps a trillion-dollar company should be able to do is distribute a dang podcast. Distribute a podcast. I don't even have the premium subscription anymore. It's just a basic bare-bones podcast. And yet Apple, for whatever reason, is seemingly unwilling to do the fixes. I've been emailing them incessantly. So if you're still listening to this, I appreciate you. You are incredibly loyal. Of course, to the new viewers and or listeners on YouTube, salute to you as well. Always remember to like, follow, and share the content if you dig what I'm doing on the AM Update. So there is that. Like I said, I appreciate everybody for continuing to fight through the issues. Ask or tell me anything. Let's go to this to begin with. Jim is the most recent one. Have you followed the controversy surrounding the New Christendom press conference in Ogden? And if so, what are your thoughts? Do you think there are legit concerns about Brian Sauvé, Eric Kahn et al., or is this a coordinated cancel job by effeminate Mike Pence types? I have a lot. I'll just speak about Brian Sauvé, and I've had contact with him. I've gone back and forth DMs. Just mostly for day job stuff, so I'm not saying like I know him. Watching the way that he handles himself on social media, yes, sometimes he's edgy, but he does, I think, and I watched a little bit, I think is it the King's Hall podcast? I watched a little bit of that where they discussed this. He said a lot of what went on at that conference was just pastoral stuff. Now, I wasn't there. But he said the vast majority, the bulk of the time in kind of the big group settings was like, how do I be a better dad? How do I be a better husband, father? I did not catch what they said about the New Christendom stuff. The pictures that I saw, I don't know in what universe it would ever be necessary, beneficial, helpful to be selling the types of books about Hitler, about Nazism. I think I saw that they were doing. So I don't think those guys are ever going to say, I'm sorry, please don't cancel me. They're never going to say that. At the same time, I'm not totally sure that you'll see that publisher back at a conference like that again. I'm not sure. I just don't know. So specifically about Brian Sauvé, from the way that I see him handle himself on social media, it's quite a bit different than, say, the Nick Fuentes or the Joel Webbin crowd, although I understand, Webbin and the Ogden guys are kind of friends, I guess. So, yeah, it's concerning that they would be hawking books like that at a conference that sounded like it was mostly geared towards just pastoral duty and care and making sure those I's are dotted and T's are crossed. I also think both things can be true. This was definitely a coordinated attempt to paint this conference as some sort of goose-stepping brown shirt regiment when it probably wasn't that. So I just... days without being accused or actually giving people fodder of calling you a Nazi, we're resetting the counter back to zero. So I also just really like Haunted Cosmos, and I like Brian Sauvé's music as well. I actually found that entire crew through Brian Sauvé's music because it's very rich, and I think it's musically very good as well. Country Squire, these are from last week when we didn't have an episode because of the water intrusion event. A little bit on that. Inspector, when we purchased this home, pointed out a small negative grade on one corner of the house. So that's where instead of the ground sloping away from the house, it's actually sloping towards the house a little bit. Don't really have a huge issue with that, except in very certain circumstances, and now it's happened 3 years in a row, and it's almost this exact time of the year, when the ground is already saturated with water, so we've already had steady rainfall, things of that nature, but it's already pretty well saturated, and then we get a monsoon on top of that, we'll have a little bit of water that comes into this corner. So I've already called and inquired about getting that negative grade fixed. It's one of those things I could do myself, but it sounds like a lot of manual labor and a lot of time that I quite frankly don't have right now. So going to get that fixed first. That's the root cause of the water intrusion. I saw people saying, hey, I hope it wasn't, I hope it was just water. Yeah, it was just water. Groundwater. It's not supposed to be in here, but it was just water. And then the next thing after that, just to be safe, in this little corner, this is my basement, by the way, in this little corner over here, I'm probably going to take up the flooring, maybe cut a little bit of drywall off as well, just to make sure there's no mold. Try to do some more waterproofing. So that was the story on last week. I had a bunch of stuff moved around over here, and I just didn't want to put it all back in place while it was drying just to do this. Even though I love doing this, it was just all discombobulated. Let's go back to Country Squire. Steven Spielberg warns that his new movie, Disclosure Day, will cause Christians to question their faith. Get over yourself, Steve. You don't understand or know the one believers have faith in. No plans to see it. From what I've heard from the reviews is that this was actually definitely an attempt at propaganda, an overt subversion of Christianity. What I have also heard is that it wasn't very good quality either. So even though it was an attempt to subvert Christianity, it was just done in such a ham-fisted and low-quality, low-rent way. It's not going to have that impact. But I do appreciate, Country Squire, your perspective in saying, yeah, who do you think you are, Steven Spielberg? Who do you think you are? You're one man up against the gates of, up against the institution that the gates of hell will not prevail against. So I like that. Dylan says, Adelaide, Australia, state bill that would have outlawed abortions after 25 weeks passes in the upper house. Premier forces a lower house vote the same day to avoid debate, and the bill is defeated heavily. 122 such abortions have been carried out in the state since they became legal in 2022. That thing that never keeps happening keeps happening. So this is actually the fact that and I know this is, I can't remember which state this is in Australia, but Adelaide is on the south coast. It surprises me at all that a bill like this is making its way through an Australian state. It kind of does. Not going to say I'm hopeful or optimistic about that, but it surprises me that this is even being debated in a place like Australia at all. Now, this is only outlawing baby killing after 25 weeks. It passed in one of the House, and then it was forced down to a lower house that same day to avoid debate, where it was defeated. But when half of your legislature or parliament, whatever you want to call it, or whatever you do call it there, when half of your governmental bodies passes a ban or a restriction on abortion in a place like Australia, that's pretty interesting. Thank you for that news from the land down under. Listening in Australia. That's really cool. Reader Runner says, have you looked at getting a Patreon for your podcast so loyal listeners can support your work? I'm thinking about it. I really hate, I offered the $5 a month subscription because I thought that was such a low dollar amount that people, that was worth it to get, 20, 21 episodes a month ad-free. That's a pretty good trade-off. Well, somebody, when we were having these distribution issues, and I understand the frustration, there's nothing I could do about it, and apparently nothing I can do about it, as we've been seeing. Somebody emailed my boss complaining about this podcast over $5. And so I just ended that altogether. The distribution has completely nuked this audience. So to make this worth my while, I might do something like that. It's sad because I used to get like 2,000 downloads like an episode. That's a pretty good podcast. Now, it's not going to make me a living. That's a pretty good podcast. Yeah, it's just gone now. Matt says, sharing this to show that some GOP senators are willing to at least sacrifice some skin to impress the sports bros. This is a Facebook link. This catch by Eric Schmidt, in the Congressional Baseball Game, completely laid out, completely put his body on the line. The great senator from the Show Me State put his body on the line, took a bloody nose, laid out for this amazing catch. So yeah, that's a dude. If your guy is laying out like that at the ball game, I'm pretty sure he's going to go balls to the wall in Congress. And that's kind of what I've seen from Eric Schmidt so far. He's been one of our better senators. James says, remember that CIA agent that had 12 gold bars in his safe? What's the actual likelihood that gold is at Fort Knox? Low. Anywhere but Fort Knox. Remember? Hey, speaking of remembering things, do you remember when we were going to do an audit? Elon Musk and Donald Trump were going to do an audit at Fort Knox? Yeah. Brady says, FYI, for those having trouble ever since the new AM update cover art on Apple Podcasts, I have trouble with the auto download. I have to go to the library, manually download the show by swiping up and then swiping hard down for the latest show to load. What's working for me is just automatically refreshing or manually refreshing the feed by swiping down. That works for me every morning. But I've heard from several people that basically nothing works in order to get this. So, like I said, I keep reaching out to Apple every single day. I'm just going to pester them until they fix it. And even then, probably not going to recover the levels of downloads that I had before. John Roy said, opinion on this week's poll. So this would have been last week's poll. The court's rogue judges are the problem with the NCAA. The NCAA has given up. Over the past 10 years, the courts have ruled over and over again against NCAA rules. Everyone now files lawsuits, starting with the NIL ruling and now Sorsby. I would agree with that. Here's the interesting part, though. In a place like Michigan or Ohio, Big Ten country, and I'm not making any cultural, what's the word for it? I'm not trying to say that the cultures are superior. There's a cultural superiority argument here. I'm just saying the attitudes from the alumni bases of Big Ten Northern schools versus the alumni bases of Southern schools, and that includes Texas, very different. I think a judge in a place like Michigan, if he had, or Ohio, if he had this case, say the Ohio State quarterback, can't remember who that is, let's say the Michigan quarterback, Bryce Underwood, he got caught doing the very same thing. I was gambling on my team's games. I was gambling on games I was playing in, although I'm not sure if Sorsby actually bet on games he was playing in. I feel really bad about it now that I've gotten caught. After I've gotten caught, I went to rehab, and now I want to play again. And I am going to go crying to a judge who is a UM Law graduate. I don't think that UM Law graduate or some local judge, I don't think that local judge does the same thing that this Texas judge did. And this Texas judge was not a Texas Tech graduate. I think it was from Houston, but one of the other schools down there. This judge that ruled in favor of Sorsby was not a Texas Tech grad, but it was a local-ish judge. I think there are far greater concerns in the North about the ramifications, the butterfly effect of local rulings like this. I think the precedent that you're setting, there's far more of a concern. And I'm not talking about the precedent you're setting from an NCAA rules and guidelines perspective. I'm talking about legal precedent. Meaning, I think there's far more concern in the North that the legal precedent you're setting is that you can get caught red-handed violating an institution's bylaws, breaking the law, which Brendan Sorsby did, and what it says when you can just cry to a judge and say mental health, the precedent that sets. I think there are far more differences. My voice is about to give out. Excuse me. I've been talking a lot. We double taped on the day job today. I've been stressed all day for the most part, and now talking for 15 minutes straight. Let's take one more question. Now X is crashing on me. X is crashing on me. Okay. Let's go to this. I think this is a good note to end on. Light the Dark California says, maybe we should get back to the basics. Read the Bible, go to church, save sex for marriage, stay married, and raise children with both a father and a mother in the home, teaching them right from wrong according to God's word. That is pretty basic. Seems like it's easier written or said than done. But that is a good word to end on. Thank you very much. And thank you for listening this week. For those of you who still remain the dedicated, loyal people, audience, still fighting through the distribution issues to get the AM update. If you would, leave a 5-star review on the platform of your choice. Although I'm starting to guess, I'm going to start to get a lot of 1-star reviews on Apple, if I get any at all. Not on my performance necessarily, but probably because of Apple's performance. Nonetheless, have a great weekend. Back at it again on Monday.